Hello and welcome. My name is Artemij Voskobojnikov, and today I'll be talking about our paper, Non-Adoption of Crypto Assets, exploring the role of trust, self-efficacy, and risk. Before going into the details, I would like to thank my co-authors for the fruitful collaboration. First, I'd like to talk about the outline. At the beginning, I will introduce the problem, some of the terms, and will then talk about our research questions. Then, I will present the underlying research model as well as the methodology. After talking about the results, I will then discuss the findings and will conclude. Crypto assets are more popular than ever. Currently, they're worth more than 1.5 trillion US dollars, and there exist over 6,000 distinct crypto assets. There are also over 60 million distinct and uniquely identified crypto asset users, and this number is growing on a daily basis. This is in part due to the media attention, but also the attention from prominent personalities, such as, for example, Jack Dorsey or Elon Musk. Prior work has investigated factors influencing crypto asset adoption. For example, Abramova and Böhme have looked into the perceived benefit and risk in the context of Bitcoin. They found that, among others, decentralization, security and control, and perceived ease of use all had a positive influence. Arias Oliva, on the other hand, applied the unified theory of acceptance and use of technology in the context of crypto assets, and found that facilitating conditions and performance expectancy both had a positive effect on the intention to adopt crypto assets. Contrary to this work on the adoption of crypto assets, not a lot of attention has been paid to the reasons against adoption. In our prior qualitative study, which was an interview-based study with 11 users and 9 non-users of crypto assets, we found that self-efficacy, situational normality, and structural assurances, as well as perceived risks, had an effect on the intention to adopt crypto assets. These findings, however, have not yet been quantitatively validated. This leads me to our research objectives that drove this study. First, we wanted to investigate the reasons against an adoption, in particularly for non-users. Next, we also wanted to compare these reasons or their behavior to the adoption behaviors of actual crypto asset users. And most importantly, we wanted to identify key constructs influencing these behaviors. To accomplish that, we conducted a survey study. We collected data through the Qualtrics panel and followed a broad sampling approach. We collected data from 200 users and 204 non-users in June 2020. For the data analysis, we used structural equation modeling using 2 research models, where in one model, the dependent variable was the adoption intention, and in the other model, the actual adoption behavior. On the right-hand side, we see one of the structural models. Here, adoption intention is the dependent variable. I am only going to go through a couple of hypotheses to give you an idea. Hypothesis 1 stated that the perceived self-efficacy has a positive effect on non-users' intention to adopt crypto assets, whereas hypothesis 2 said that the perceived self-efficacy has a negative effect on the non-user's perceived risk associated with crypto assets. More details can be found in the paper. We had several constructs that we wanted to compare between users and non-users. For example, the perceived self-efficacy had 4 items. We asked both participants group about their confidence in their abilities to purchase crypto assets, making payments with crypto assets, explaining the difference between public and private key, as well as explaining the purpose of transaction fees. Unsurprisingly, we see that users scored significantly higher on all 4 questionnaire items than non-users. When it comes to the perceived security cost, here we looked into the perceived cost of securing the crypto assets, perceived cost of keeping security measures for crypto assets up to date, as well as the perceived cost of security investments into equipment. Contrary to the perceived self-efficacy, we found no significant difference. When it comes to the trust constructs, however, we found that users again scored significantly higher on all 5 constructs. This holds true for both the structural assurance constructs as well as the situational normality. When it comes to the reasons against adoption, we found that non-users were particularly concerned with security risks. When we look at the top 3 items, we see that The top 3 reasons were actual security risks, such as, for example, concern of falling victim to fraud or crime, or actual security vulnerabilities of both crypto assets and crypto wallets. Now, let's take a look at the actual structural models. On the left-hand side, we see the structural model with adoption intention as the dependent variable. Here, trust had a statistically significant effect on the intention to adopt crypto assets, meaning that those non-users that scored higher on this construct were more likely to adopt crypto assets in 2020. It is important to note that this structural model was only based on the data from the 204 non-users. On the right-hand side, we see the model that was based on both the data from non-users and users. The adoption behavior is therefore a binary variable, meaning whether a person actually held crypto assets or not. Contrary to the adoption intention model, we see that trust has no statistically significant effect. Now, however, self-efficacy becomes the only statistically significant factor that has an influence on the actual adoption behavior. At this point, I would like to note that self-efficacy in the adoption intention model on the left side has an indirect effect on the adoption intention, meaning that if we remove the trust construct, the path from self-efficacy to adoption intention becomes statistically significant. The effect of perceived risk was not significant in either the adoption intention model or the adoption behavior model. This brings me to the main findings. We found that non-users score significantly lower on trust and perceived self-efficacy constructs when compared to the actual user population. Interestingly, only the self-efficacy was shown to be a statistically significant predictor of adoption behavior. Non-users were also mostly concerned with potential risks, including fraud, crime, and security vulnerabilities of both crypto assets themselves as well as software, such as, for example, the corresponding cryptocurrency wallets. And lastly, risk was not found to be significant, which is in very stark contrast to prior findings in related areas, such as, for example, mobile banking, online banking, but also prior studies on Bitcoin and crypto assets. In conclusion, one can increase the perceived self-efficacy of non-users, and this increase can facilitate adoption among non-adopters. This can, for example, be achieved through more usable interfaces or more usable software in general. Our comparison between those two populations, meaning users and non-users of crypto assets, also shed light on the key differences between those two populations, which otherwise would not be possible to identify. We therefore believe that to truly evaluate adoption behaviors in a particular domain, one really needs to investigate both the adoption behaviors of actual users as well as the adoption intentions of non-users. And most importantly, one has to compare the constructs or the scores on these constructs among those two populations. And lastly, we were not able to confirm the effect of risk on the intention to adopt crypto assets. We found that both users and non-users of crypto assets were aware of the most prevalent risks, and perhaps the intention to adopt crypto assets does not necessarily pose a direct risk, contrary to actual usage. Thank you very much.